So we've got to the stage in our project now where we've got a small piece of functionality working within our project. And although it's only a small part of the project, it's worth at this point committing it to our Git repository, pushing it up to our GitHub repo so that it's available for other people to work on if we're working in a team of developers, and also pushing it live to our server. So we're going to do this by setting up what we call a pipeline, sometimes called a continuous integration or continuous deployment pipeline. And we're going to actually set it up so that every time we push our code to GitHub, it's actually going to push our code to our server as well. So in reality, this would probably be a testing or a staging server to start off with, so that the quality assurance team or other people that you're working with can test the code in a real environment rather than on your local machine. But in our example, this will just be the one deployment environment, the one server that we've set up. So how are we going to set up this pipeline? Well, in today's tutorial, we're just going to quickly have an overview of what the pipeline will look like and how we're going to implement it. But essentially, we're going to take all the code that we're writing on our local computer, and obviously it's set up as a Git repository, the code is, so we'll be able to push that to GitHub, and we're going to push that and save all our code in the GitHub account and repository that we've set up for our project. So how are we going to get our GitHub source code onto our server, which is the DigitalOcean droplet that we set up a few tutorials ago? Well, there are different ways that you can do this, and there are different providers who will provide services that will enable you to do this. But since we're using GitHub for our code, they do provide a service called Github Actions, which allows you to actually build your code within GitHub and then do things with it afterwards, such as deploy it to the server. So that's the approach that we're going to be using for our project. So essentially what's going to happen within our pipeline is when we pushed our code to a specific branch on the project, it'll most likely be the main branch, we're going to then build the code using a GitHub Actions pipeline. So in the following tutorials, we're going to see how to set up the GitHub action, but this will build the project. We can run any tests or do any other necessary things that we want. And essentially what we'll end up with is two things here. We'll end up with a built API, and also move this over here, we'll have a built front end as well. So although we haven't started working on this as a project at the moment, we'll have something like this, where the GitHub action, the pipeline itself, will build both of our projects. And then at that point, we'll have the code ready and it'll be built in a production ready way. And then we can just deploy that to our server. So we can do this via the GitHub action as well. So essentially the GitHub action will take the code that we've been building over here, and it'll look a little bit something like this. So it'll take the API and also the front-end application once that's developed, and we'll put some commands into the GitHub action into the pipeline, which will take that code and push it to the server. So there's lots of things to set up here. So we need to configure our server to be able to accept the code from GitHub as well. And then we actually need to create the GitHub pipeline using the GitHub action. And that'll take us a few steps just to go through how to create the action, how to configure it to do what we want it to do, and then also how to actually push the code to the server at the end. So that's just a quick overview of the pipeline that we're going to be using, our continuous deployment pipeline. So in the next tutorial, we'll get set up with our GitHub action and start building that and see how that looks when you actually push code to the repository, and where you can see those actions in progress and see the results if there are any problems. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.